Hello and welcome to Showtuned, a podcast about musicals and the craft of storytelling through songs.
Every week, we explore the layers of ways songs tell stories, from melodies to harmonies, lyrics to dialogue, characters to scenes, and how it all comes together in this truly unique medium where songs are really the engine of the story. I'm Brett Bowles. I'm a professional songwriter, I'm an educator, and I'm the creator of the hit TikTok and Instagram series, The MT, and the founder of the MT Studio, where I've been spilling the tea on why certain musical theater songs make us feel things, and also helping songwriters hone their craft.
And I'm Josh Shelton, a filmmaker, I'm a songwriter, and I'm the founder of Counterpoint Musicals, which is a film production company that is making new movie musicals. And this podcast is really meant to be an exploration for anyone who loves musicals. If you're a songwriter or a playwright or a performer or a theater kid or just a super fan, our goal is that you'll find something interesting here. And today on the show, I'm very excited because we're actually going to talk about kind of the differences between stage musicals and movie musicals.
I love this idea because they each have their inherent challenges and things that one can do that the other one doesn't do as well. So I'm looking forward to breaking that down.
Yeah, I mean, I am a filmmaker and I came to musicals more from the film side, like whether that was watching Disney movies or the film versions of stage shows like Music Man and West Side Story. And as I now am producing new movie musicals, this is something I think about a lot because while they are so similar, stories told with songs, they're completely different mediums. Sitting in the room with someone on stage is different than sitting in a theater or at home with a story on screen. So lots of differences. Today we'll just do an overview. We'll see how deep we go. I'm sure we'll have other episodes where we go deeper. And stick around to the end of the episode to hear what we're listening to this week. At the end of each episode, we want to give some recommendations of what we're listening to, whether it's from a musical or not. I love getting recommendations from people, not just the algorithm. So we're sharing ours at the end of the episode. And as always, we're recording bonus content for any paid members on Patreon. And today we're going to talk about 3 songs that were written for the movie versions of stage shows or of pre-existing shows, I guess. We're going to talk about the live action Beauty and the Beast, the song Evermore. We're going to talk about Wicked's No Place Like Home. And in the film version of Into the Woods, Stephen Sondheim wrote a new song called She'll Be Back that was cut. But we're going to talk about that in the bonus content. So if you want to hop over to Patreon, you can actually join as a free member, which we would love. We're building a community there. But if you're a paid subscriber, we have bonus content for you over there.
But before we get into all of that stuff, we start every episode with a quick segment that we title, What is Your I Want Song for This Week? We think it's a good idea to set an intention or a goal for the week to kind of orient yourself in space and time, both physically and emotionally. So we always love to hear what your I Want song for the week is. Feel free to message us. But in the meantime, we're going to share what ours are. So Josh, why don't you go first? What's your I Want song this week?
My I Want song is very simple. I want to exercise. That's what it is. I've been on a pretty good rhythm, but coming out of having very young kids, the last multiple years, rhythm of exercise has been all over the place. So mine is I want to keep exercising, keep the rhythm, keep myself going, keep moving. That's what it is. Keep moving.
I wish I could say I wanted to do that. I definitely need to do that. I'm not so sure I want to do that, but
Well, I guess that's actually the I want. It's that I want to exercise.
there you go.
I want to look forward to exercise, to be excited for it. And it's happening. They say that, if you do something for enough weeks, you then start to want to do it more. So I'm close, but I know I just got to keep going.
Wow, I have a lot of admiration for you. That's
We'll see if I get there. I need to write the song to keep me going.
That's right. Well, mine for the week, I think, is the weather over my way. I'm in Connecticut, and the weather has been just really crazy. It'll be like 85 one day and then like 35 the next. So would love some weather stabilization. So I don't know. Maybe that's my I want song for this week is stabilization of the weather. Weather stabilization. It's not a great hook, but you know.
But this is something that you technically don't have any control over.
Yes.
But this is more like a wish.
Oh, it's
This
a
is your
wish.
wish.
It's a wish song.
I love that.
Feel it.
I think that's a great reminder that, I want songs. I've lately given a lot of like maybe more tangible ones that are within me to achieve. But it's important to know that there's plenty of great I want songs that are much more wishes that are being cast to the universe.
That's true.
So I want to exercise and you want warmer weather.
Great. That's it.
You're sort of hoping for spring. You're there's I feel like there's a spring song in there of
Yeah,
which
there
there's
you
a lot
go.
of.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's a spring song.
All right, so let's dive into the main topic for today, which is the difference between making a musical for the stage versus a musical for the screen, for a film. I think one of the best places to start the conversation is the fundamental difference, which I referenced earlier, is being in the room, the literal shared experience of being in the theater with someone in the same room on stage versus having something literally between you, some sort of projection or a screen. You are not in the same space. And that is a different experience. Is that a good place to start, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. We are very fond of saying in the theater that our final collaborator is the audience. When we bring the audience into the room, that they get to be the final collaborator on the piece, and they really do, because there is a living, breathing energy that changes from day to day, from audience to audience. The show will never be the same twice, so it is a very different experience for sure.
I love that idea of the final collaborator, because also when a stage show goes up, it goes through various iterations where you're learning where the laughs are and where the reactions are, and there is that back and forth. Or you have another thing that can happen where the audience just cheers more and more, and the actors have to wait, and that can be show to show. Right? The matinee might not get as many laughs and ovations as the Friday night crowd, right?
Totally.
It's never set. Whereas a film is literally locked. They call it the picture is locked. And depending on the scale of the film, bigger films do have test audiences and share them, and they try to incorporate that feedback. But ultimately, you are locking something and presenting it in one way, and trusting yourself as a artist or entertainer, or however you define yourself as a filmmaker, that version will connect with audiences, and therefore it is a different process. You really get to an ending in film, whereas in theater there can be a continued evolution throughout the whole run.
Yeah, and even after sometimes. I mean, now, even after a show closes, the writers sometimes will make changes before it goes to licensing, before other people do it. So there's a sense that it is a very living, breathing thing, a stage musical that, once you make a film, I mean, you can make another film, but once you make the film, that's the way it is forever and always. It's immortal in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And also, what I remind a lot of people I work with when we're talking about how do we turn this into a movie, I'm actually working with some folks right now who wrote a great off-Broadway show that was like more of a concert, and it's such a great show. And we're talking about how do we make it into a movie? And we're having these conversations of like, well, it's not a concert anymore. There is the difference of I'm sitting here in the audience and I'm sort of in awe of whomever is on stage. And I just buy into that because I'm out for the night, here we are, and I'm being sung to, which is inherently charismatic and fun. But then when you make it a movie, that concert element is taken away. And there are ways to bridge the gap, whether you're doing something like Hedwig and the Angry Inch or Tick, Tick, Boom, where you have maybe a performance element of the show that you intercut with another narrative. That's one way to approach it. But then other times you actually just have to completely remove yourself from however the show is presented and just make it a movie. Put the camera in real environments or put the characters in totally different situations. And that's challenging. We've saw with the last 5 years when they adapted that to a film, a lot of the theater folks who fell in love with it as an intimate stage show had a hard time accepting it as an indie film. Even though I've talked to plenty of people who saw the indie film having never seen the show, and they're like, "This is a great show. These songs are amazing," because they had
Yeah.
no context.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In the spirit of approaching this from a craft perspective and how do we write shows and how do we make them for different mediums, I just think that is always the starting point, which is if we're making it for the stage, we know the audience is sitting there and interacting in a very different way than if we're making it for a movie. And therefore, we should be writing songs and pacing the show out with that difference in mind. And the other big difference that a film has is literally the perspective of the camera showing you what to look at all times, which is completely different than sitting in an audience and choosing where you look. That affects the way songs can be written and overall stories can be paced.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I mean, when you think about a stage, everything is happening right there in front of you, and you, as an audience member, you can choose to look wherever you want. I mean, sure, the director and the choreographer's job is to sort of direct your eye to where they want, where the action is taking place, but that doesn't stop you from looking somewhere else. But a camera will literally control exactly what you're seeing at any given moment in time.
Yeah. And actually, I was at an event for Wicked for Good, part two, and I was chatting with the director, John M. Chu, who also, directed In the Heights. And we were talking about this difference between film versus stage. And he said, there's a moment in Wicked for Good. And he said, on a stage, what you would probably do is put a spotlight on her. And he said, but in the world I was in, a spotlight on her, technically I could do that in a film, you can do that. But he said, I knew I didn't want to do that. So I thought, what are other ways that I can create a spotlight that isn't through lighting? And his choice was through sound. He said, I'm going to have her close that door and have all the sound go away, which in a film, especially a musical and stuff, is a big dynamic way to focus your attention and bring you into this moment to cue the song. And I just loved that as a reminder of the different tools at your disposal when you're in different mediums. And of course, you can do sound cues and on the stage, but in a film, just thinking of that, some of it is lighting, some of it is camera, some of it is sound, and how do we create that spotlight?
That's really cool, and just to think of the ways that both mediums have things that are at once very limiting about them, but also very freeing about them. And I feel like those things are almost maybe opposite in a way. And because I think on the stage, you have an entire audience who's there to. There's a social contract, this unwritten contract that we suspend all disbelief, and you can kind of get away with a whole slew of storytelling techniques that don't require a lot of technical buy-in from an audience. I feel like you can get away with a lot of more fantastical things. I don't know. I feel like there's maybe a different expectation in a film.
Yeah, that suspension of disbelief when you're watching a stage show is certainly much higher because they aren't going to literally do everything they're talking about. Your brain fills it in and you accept it. And in a movie, we're generally expecting to see the real thing and it should look real, which is also why I think animated musicals work so great because you're brought into this fantasy world inherently, and we are more willing to believe lots of things, that a beauty could fall in love with a beast, that a mermaid exists in the first place and could go on these fairy tales. But then also within the medium of animation, you can do really incredible visual things that are just so dynamic that heighten the music. It's not an accident that animated musicals work so well because they have that similar willing suspension of disbelief. That sort of, okay, we're just in a fantasy here. And when you go to a stage show, you also are walking through these doors and taking a seat and opening your mind that this, flat stage and black curtains is going to be an entire world, right?
Yeah. Think about those, like the Disney Renaissance movies. And a lot of they're like 80, 85 minutes long, so they're pretty short. So you also have to think about how many songs do you have in that? What's the pacing like on those songs? And then you look at a show like Beauty and the Beast, for example, when you expand it to a stage musical, now all of a sudden, instead of 85 minutes, you have 2.5 hours to fill. So you're, essentially looking at an extra 40 minutes or so of showtime that allows you to write even more music and expand the story in ways that you maybe couldn't otherwise. So this is like a totally different way of thinking about these things.
Absolutely. Number of songs is certainly a difference between most films and stage shows. And going back to like the golden age of film musicals, the MGM era, the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Bing Crosby, Gene Kelly, all of those movies, they're not having 15 songs or 30 songs and 3 hour runtimes. They're similarly short. And also the songs in those older ones serve a slightly different function because they're more of a showcase, right? They're singing and dancing. And in that way, it's actually kind of more similar to a stage show,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There is that sort of concert and just performance. And literally in those older musicals, they are just playing to the camera like they were on a stage. And in fact, so many sequences, they are just filming them on a stage. And I would
Hmm.
say more than half of them, if not the vast majority of those golden era musical films, are about musicians, right? They're backstage musicals. So it's interesting because there are just different types of musical films and how that genre has evolved. And the way you write it and the way you conceptualize it is very different depending on the type of show you're making, the type of film you're making.
Yeah. And so now think about like song moments on stage versus song moments on film and what you can get away with on stage that you can't get away with on film. For example, on stage, you can have a number that's pretty much park and bark for 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes, and an audience will totally just sit captivated by the whole thing. Whereas on film, that's a little trickier.
It's much trickier. And I think it is very much one of the challenges when you're adapting a stage show to a film
Mm.
that if you're sitting in the room with someone and they're singing, that is one of the most captivating things I think in human experiences, right? We can be walking down the street and someone is singing on the side of the street and we'll stop and watch that person. If we are, at someone's house and a friend sings and has a great voice or is at the piano, we'll stop and be captivated. Similarly, if you're sitting in a theater and even though it's this big production, if this great performer parks and barks, like you said, and sings a great tune, we're pulled in. For some reason, if someone in a film just stops and sings and the camera just sits on them and nothing really happens, the odds of us being fully captivated are much lower. There are films that do it, but
Yeah.
it's harder.
It's so crazy that like, is it because there's a psychological thing of like, well, that person's not really there doing that right now, so I don't have to devote my full attention the way that I would if it was live in front of me? Like, what is the psychological reason behind that?
I think it has to do more with the bigger story and tone of the film than the actual sort of broad description of a scene like that not working. I actually think that in general, we assume that that won't work because it sounds like nothing is happening. And in the medium of filmmaking, we're thinking about moving pictures, right? And by definition, pictures should be moving. And if you're just holding still on someone, nothing is moving, right? So I think it's one of those things that film executives or film people might think won't work. Now, that said, I think if tonally you create a film that is about intimate connection and intimate characters singing important things, you can have that happen. I mean, what is how when Wizard of Oz opens and Judy Garland is singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I need to rewatch it, but it isn't like a whole bunch of stuff is happening. She's pretty much just sort of singing that tune, and it's iconic because it is this girl on a farm yearning for something else, and it's a great song, right? I think that in films, if we want someone to do that, we just need to make sure it makes sense in the story we're telling and that we've earned it through whatever scenario that character is in. Don't assume it will work because it worked on the stage, but also don't assume it can't work if you, as the filmmaker, as a storyteller, really want an intimate moment like that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And what is the thought on song length in film versus stage?
So I think this also goes back to your note earlier that stage shows are generally much longer and
Mm-hmm.
movies are generally shorter. So the attention span of the film goer is expecting it to probably move more quickly. And so when you have a song that lasts 4 minutes or more, if stuff isn't happening, if new information, which is something, we've brought up on previous episodes, if new information isn't being revealed, treat it like any other scene. You don't want a 4 or 5 minute scene of nothing happening without a song. So you wouldn't want a 4 to 5 minute scene of a song if new information isn't happening. So I think that's also why songs and films tend to be shorter. Also, we chatted about this before, but in preparing for this episode, I was revisiting it. A lot of I think, songs that are written for films, more recent films in particular, lean more toward verse chorus because
Yeah.
they want to be more poppy. They want to be more accessible. Taking a step back for a moment, and when we look at the two different mediums, when I think of the stage show, the broadest way I think of this like perspective difference is that on a stage show, it's live, it's a shared experience. There is this energy going back and forth between the performers and the audience. The performances are also calibrated for the back row, right? You're playing
Yes.
to everyone in the room.
Totally.
And also, like we said, the audience accepts the heightened reality. And then there is this sort of, you're stepping into a musical, you're willingly stepping into this experience. You've taken a lot of effort to choose to go see a musical, right? You're in New York or the local theater with the tour or the high school musical, whatever it is. Whereas on film, it is a controlled, framed experience. Every image is very designed and controlled.
When you mentioned musicals, live stage musicals being calibrated for people who are sitting in the back row, I mean, generally, you think about going to a Broadway show. I mean, sure, there are some shows that are in smaller theaters, but typically, you're going to have 1,000 seats. Or when you think about the musicals that go on tour and they play these houses that are like 2,500, 3,000 seats, sometimes 4,000 seats, like these huge venues. And there's something about musical theater, something about, characters singing, breaking into song and singing and belting their faces off in these big dance numbers that seem to like need to fill a large space. And so when you take that crazy kind of big space filling energy and you're taking that down to something that where only like a piece of glass sort of separates, the viewer from that, I would imagine it changes the entire game.
I think that's a perfect way to talk about it. How do you take this thing that is designed to just project out and capture everyone in the back row? It is inherently big and capture it into a little camera, even if you're then projecting on a big screen. But that's why I think one of the reasons Sound of Music is so incredible is they're like, well, what's bigger than a theater? The Alps,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
the
Yeah,
mountains and on a
yeah,
helicopter, right?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
let's be huge
yeah.
and then come in and that movie is so big, that's why it works. Even Wicked, I think John M. Chu did an incredible job in the Wicked
Hmm.
movies. And again, I think, and it was by and large, they were embraced by the theater community. I'm sure Plenty of people out there have their various opinions and hot takes, but he made a big movie. He made it a big spectacle, a big fantasy. But I think the thing to remember is that that is one of the big challenges when adapting from Broadway or from the stage to the screen. I
Yes.
think when movies are designed for the screen is when they can be really impactful because the filmmakers and the songwriters are writing a movie first, whether they're writing it for Bing Crosby or for Gene Kelly. That is a great advantage. Of course, with The Greatest Showman, they wanted to make something big. Or with La La Land, Damien Chazelle wanted to make something specific. He wanted it to be an LA story that was a throwback to these, golden age musicals. And they did that specifically, and they knew it could work as a movie, and they used the language of cinema. And of course, that's a Hollywood film, so it's all about movies, of course. But I think that's what it comes back to: is what is the intention? And shows that are written for the stage are designed for the stage. Shows that are written for movies are designed for movies. And when we try to adapt to them, it can be challenging because it is just it's a very different medium. Also, there are shows like The Music Man
Hmm.
is it's a small-ish show. Like, yeah, there are big moments, but like it's this guy in this little town in Iowa. And I think that part of the reason that movie works so well, other than being brilliantly directed and acted and performed, is that it's not a big story. It's not inherently big. It's actually pretty small. And therefore you just go to this, back lot and film this small town. It works really, really well.
Now, what about structure, into like overall structure? Because musicals by and large are structured in 2 acts. Films generally are structured in 3 acts. So how do we sort of bridge that divide, or how does that work?
To remind everyone, musicals are in 2 acts, and generally you have, at the end of Act One, something big has happened. There's also usually some big reveal kind of at the end of Act One, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, a lot of times end of Act One things are kind of going well, right? Would you say that's like generally true? Like end of Act One in a stage show, things are kind of going well for the main
I
characters.
mean, I think it depends. I think the rule is really that you wanna leave people coming back wondering what's going to happen next, or maybe things are going. They think maybe things are going well, but we know, but the audience is a step ahead, Or sometimes you have moments like the end of Light in the Piazza, where Clara's mother walks in and finds her with Fabrizio, and it's like, oh, what's gonna happen, and
Yeah.
then the lights go
Yeah.
out. So it's moments like that where you gotta leave them wondering what's gonna happen next.
Yeah, or things are going well and then something happens to twist it,
Right,
just before the end.
right.
But they're big. And so in films, the 3 act structure is basically the shortest way to think of it. Act one is set it up, act two is mix it up, act three is fix it up. That's how it was described to me. But really, it's that first act is sort of getting our characters set to go on whatever their journey is. It's usually about 30 pages or 20 to 30 minutes. Act two is the longer part. It's about 60 pages or 60 minutes. And the end of Act two, though, is generally the character's lowest point. And then Act three is they've kind of learned everything and they get to go fix it all up and figure out what to do or have that last sort of, battle or last sort of journey or last thing they have to do. But if you notice, those acts don't line up with the middle of the movie. And the middle of the movie is often called the midpoint, which is things are generally going sort of well. And then there's what's called a midpoint reversal, where things then suddenly turn in the other direction. And even if you think of something like Star Wars, right? Halfway through, they actually save the princess. They get Leia off. They save Princess Leia. And then things go wrong in a whole other way and it twists. So I think in general, the end of Act one is more likely the midpoint of your movie, and the end of Act two is just going to be a low point that happens in what would be Act two of a stage show. The problem is when adapting a show, is to your point, if a stage show is 2.5 hours long, you usually can't fit all of that into a movie. So then you're forced with the decision of what do we cut, or do we do Wicked and split it into two? I would say the vast majority of stage shows don't work as well as Wicked did split into two. And even with it, a lot of people, I think, felt that the second movie wasn't as strong. But it's certainly, if you look at it kind of as a superhero movie, the first movie sets her up to like kind of get her powers. And then the second movie is her using those powers to save everyone. Like it technically works when you think of it, regardless of, whether or not audiences felt it worked.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Now, why? And I just don't know. I'm not a film person, so I don't know. So this is fun because I get to learn too. So obviously, so when you're in a show, you have an act break, so the audience goes away for 15 minutes and then comes back and finishes the show, right? But so if you have a 2.5 hour show and you make a 2.5 hour movie, what is it about? Is it just audience expectation or norms, or like what is it about the normal 3-act structure of a movie that can't work as a 2-act structure, or that normally wouldn't work as a 2-act structure if you just decided, well, we're going to make this movie in 2 acts instead of 3?
Well, I think one should not get too hung up on acts in the first place in a movie
Sure.
because it's fluid. So because there isn't a break in the middle unless you're watching the original Mary Poppins, which did have an intermission in theaters. I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that. I'd forgotten that, but yes, I did know that.
Yeah, Mary Poppins as a film had an intermission in movie theaters when it came out. But generally, because films don't have a break, there are plenty of screenwriters and filmmakers who say, yes, you should follow the 3-act structure because throughout the history of like human storytelling, that's a thing that seems to work, but not to be so strict about what it is. Whereas in a play, you have a break where you have to let everyone go to the bathroom. Similarly, in TV, before streaming, you needed act breaks because that's where the commercials went. And so the hour-long shows were written in 5 acts. The half-hour shows were written in 3 to 4 acts. There's all sorts of different TV shows use different act breaks as well, but they had literal breaks. So because movies don't have literal breaks, you don't need to be too strict about it other than basic storytelling structure and the arc and flow.
Yeah, like the Disney's easiest to think about because they were, musical movies that then became musical shows, right? So they're straight adaptations. So if you think about Little Mermaid, for example, okay, let's take that one. So we have Poor Unfortunate Souls. Would you consider that in the movie? Would that be the end of? I mean, I guess that would be the end of Act One, right? I mean, because that ends up being the end of Act One in the stage
Yeah.
version
Yeah,
as
basically,
well.
because that's when she transitions from being in the
Yeah,
water to being on land. That could
yeah.
be the end of Act One. Yeah.
So that's the end. And then when they transferred that to the stage, that also became the end of Act One. Although there was more development in the first act and more songs that didn't exist in the movie, so they elongated that a bit. Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast and the stage version, the song that ends Act One was not a song in the movie at all. There was no song for the Beast in the movie. So they added If I Can't Love Her for the stage version, and that ends Act One, and then Act Two begins with Something There.
We'll talk about this a little bit in the bonus content for Patreon, but when they made the live action version of Beauty and the Beast, they didn't add that song, but they wrote a different Beast song in Evermore, which again is because they were adapting the animated film into a live action film. They were not adapting the stage musical into a movie, which is its own unique thing. But also, when you were bringing that up, that also reminded me of the process of making a film. And when you are writing a movie and going into production on a movie, you actually have a very limited amount of time. Even on a big budget movie, you only have the actors for a short amount of time, relatively speaking. And so when you're writing songs, you're kind of giving each character one song, right? And because you want to optimize their time, you want to, it's going to cost more. Probably the more you pay big stars things, the more you bring people in. But you kind of give the people, the different stars, one song. On the stage, it's totally different. This person is here 6 days a week for however many shows plus rehearsals. You want to give different characters and different performers multiple songs. It's just a much more involved process. The hours that these performers put into the shows, and therefore the way you're writing them and making them is very different. And you can have Beauty and the Beast, which is like the Beast shouldn't have a song in the movie, right? In the animated film, the Beast doesn't have a song, right? I mean, I forget if he sings a verse in.
He does doing something more, I think. And when she didn't shut her up, my
Yeah, yeah,
dog. So there's like
exactly.
a teeny bit,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
not
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like a verse. And it also makes sense for the character. He's this reclusive, beast who is, dealing with a lot of stuff. And so he's not singing. But once you put it on the stage, you're like, he needs a song. And then when they bring it back, they give him a song. So I think that's another thing to remember is that in a film, you're dealing with a very, very limited amount of time. And then go to an indie film, you're doing that in a couple weeks, right? That you're going to be filming. It's such a limited amount of time. And stage is literally the exact opposite. It is a ton of time that these performers are committing. And then conversely, they're also performing so much that you don't want them to hurt themselves. They also need breaks.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, I could keep talking about the difference between movie musicals and stage musicals, and of course, all the ways that I think we can innovate the movie musical genre because I do think they were really innovative for a while, but now we're making less original movie musicals, which is why have my company, Counterpoint Musicals. But I think from that broad perspective of just setting us in the intention of what we are making. If it's a stage show, we have the audience in the theater, we have performers there every day, we have more of a sort of concert interaction experience. And on the film side, we have the camera directing our attention, we have the limited time with the performers. And I just think I think we need more movie musicals because I love them. And I think we need to also let some of our stage shows just be stage shows. We can always adapt them and maybe we'll like the movie versions, maybe we won't, but the stage version, there's nothing that beats sitting in a theater hearing someone sing or seeing them dance and seeing the spectacle.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I think, just as a takeaway, speaking as the voice of education here, I think it's really important to understand that these both of these media, the stage medium and the film medium, they're both approached by people who make conscious decisions because they know and understand the medium that they're writing for. And so knowing some of these things now maybe a little better than you did coming into this episode, it's always cool to, next time you go to see a show on stage, like think about some of these things that we talked about. And the next time you see a musical movie, think about the stuff that we talked about here because you may start to see them in a new way, which is always my goal and my mission is to help people listen and to see musicals in a new way, whether that's film or stage. So take that with you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one informs the other. And we all know that, Alan Menken and Howard Ashman very intentionally said, let's bring Broadway to the world of animated films. And they did incredible things. But then the next generation of Broadway songwriters, whether it's, Bobby Lopez or Lin-Manuel Miranda, they're bringing their Broadway to film musicals. I think it's always good to look, outside your specific maybe area of interest and focus to find inspiration. And speaking of which, that can transition us to our end segment of what are you listening to this week? So would you like to go first, Brett? What are you listening to this week?
I'm happy to go first. Now this may surprise people. I don't really listen to music that much outside. I mean, everything that I do all day is music oriented, so I tend to not listen to a lot. However, when my girlfriend does listen to a lot of stuff, and when she's in the car, inevitably we have music on. Sometimes it's Showtunes and sometimes it's not. But we've been listening to one of her favorite shows is The Bridges of Madison County, Jason Robert Brown score. And so we've been listening to that a lot lately. And I saw that on Broadway, and I enjoyed it, and I really do enjoy the score. If you haven't heard that score, give it a listen. Jason Robert Brown is, he's one of the greats. So
He truly is. And that, I believe, was a book that was in a movie and then a musical stage show.
yeah, yep.
Now, do you know if the musical is based on the movie or just based on the book?
I don't know which one. I don't know if it was based on one over the other or if they used elements of both. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, anyway, great. Love it. Bridges of Madison County. So what I've been listening to this week, and there's plenty. My listening ranges from jazz to pop to everything. But this week, after one of our previous episodes, Gypsy came up. I think it might have been the first episode, and so I went back to the original Broadway cast recording of Gypsy, but I discovered on Spotify, whichever version of the album I clicked on, they also had demos with Ethel Merman. So if you go on Spotify, and we'll link to it in the notes, but it's like the last 4 songs or so are just say demo, because I was listening to it and then it was just like Ethel Merman with a piano, and I was like, what is going on? And then I checked it out and it was a demo. So there's 4 or 5 tracks of Ethel Merman demo for the original Gypsy. So I encourage everyone to check that out.
That's amazing. I've never heard that, so I will for sure be checking that out. Thank you.
Well, that's the show for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow, and be sure to check us out on Patreon. You can join as a free member, be part of the community, or if you are able to join as a paid member, we have bonus content for you, and we are so grateful. It's the best way to support the show. So thanks so much.
And, of course, as always, if you have a friend, mother, father, brother, cousin, etc. who loves musicals, please share this with them. We want to spread the joy of musicals to everyone.
Absolutely. So thanks again for listening to Showtuned, a podcast about musicals and the craft of storytelling through song.